You're listening to a Sculpted Life podcast brought to you by Tiya International. Interviews with creatives around the globe. Our sculpting material, Tiya Premium, is the all-weather sculpting material. Add water, knead like dough, sculpt it. Make art for your garden. No firing, no molds, no kidding.
So yeah, I'm Yvonne, and I met Kim and Warren on their wedding day, actually, which was really funny because I also got to meet Richard Taylor that day, who was Warren's best man, which was weird.
Wow.
Yeah, it was quite a surreal experience because my husband and I, before we left Edinburgh to go and live in Australia and then New Zealand, we watched Lord of the Rings like so many times and watched all of the extras and used to watch Richard Taylor chatting away, and never in a million years would we have ever thought that our product would be once being used in Weta. Which is just,
exactly.
It's insane.
Yeah, that's so awesome. I watched all those extras too, all the behind the scenes when the first DVDs came out. Yeah, that was good stuff.
Thank you so much for being here. And I guess I want to start off by asking, because I know I've kind of done a little bit of digging on you guys.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, I love how you call me ma'am. That's fantastic.
Well, we're from Texas, you know.
So, Brandon, if you were not a sculptor, what would you be?
You know, what I would be is a journalist. I was in college and my major was journalism. And I had a strong desire to do that before I learned that I could sculpt. I didn't start sculpting until I was in my 20s.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Jared's a little younger than me. He was like 17.
Mm-hmm.
And so we started late in life.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had a real interest in journalism before we entered this world.
Right. So you would be doing that?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh. And what kind of journalism?
Well, probably political. I was very interested in Watergate when I was young. It happened when I was just very tiny. But as I got older and I read about it, I was very interested in that kind of stuff.
Excellent. And Jared, what would you have done?
I love animals, so maybe some kind of dog rescue or vet. I might not be smart enough to be a vet, but something like that.
I love it.
Yeah, something with dogs or something.
Yep. And if you were sitting around, I hear that you guys, your influencers are like, you know, you're a big fan of Frank Frazzetti and Rodin.
Yes, ma'am.
Totally.
If those two were sitting at your table over dinner, what 2 questions would you ask each of them?
Oh, that's good.
That's really good.
That is good.
I think our questions to them may be in the well. I think what we have in common with those guys, we're not anywhere near on their level. But there's an unfinished quality to our work. We leave our work kind of rough, and Rodin very much did that. And Frazetta was a very, very loose in his paintings, and they were both absolute geniuses. And I think we're trying to somehow emulate that a little bit. I think the question would be something along those lines, like, why did you not feel that you need to finish out your work so smoothly and tightly and cleanly? Because that's the inspiration I think we draw from Rodin, certainly.
Right.
And Frazetta is along those same lines. We were very moved by Frazetta's work when we were young, and we see Frazetta sculptures that are marketed, and we often see these sculptures, and they're very clean and tight. And to us, Frazetta's work was loose or sort of raw and organic. And I would definitely ask, you know, how they saw their work and why and how they were inspired to keep it so loose and suggestive and raw and organic, and that's what I would ask.
Well, there's it's difficult to translate Frazetta into 3D because you have to make some decisions that he didn't make. Like the boots will often just get wider and fuzzier and kind of fade out. And in a sculpture, you have to make those decisions. Exactly where does it end, and how far forward does it come, and how 3D is it? And so there ends up being a lot more lines than he really had on the page.
Exactly.
Okay, so you would ask them about that. I like it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'd probably ask the same thing, actually. And I didn't know about, when I heard that you were influenced by those two people, I knew Rodin's work, but I hadn't heard of Frank before, so I had to look him up.
Right.
I was like, that's pretty cool.
This is probably, considered the greatest fantasy painter of all time. And he influenced generations of artists, not just us, but fantasy painters and illustrators and sculptors, basically artists in every medium that does any kind of fantasy work. This is the man for us.
The Conan covers were what I first saw.
Right.
We had an uncle that had all the Robert E. Howard Conan books on a shelf, and about 6 of them were Frazetta, and a couple of them were kind of faux Frazetta wannabes, but the ones that were just like, oh, what is this? This is...
Yeah, and I've heard stories that, so they were hiring him to do covers for these books, and at some point, these art directors started buying these paintings and just having the writers write a book to match the painting. They had turned the process on its head. That's how popular he got, and how amazing and evocative his paintings really were.
Wow. And have you ever taken, I'm guessing you have you taken his work and made something of your own from it?
We have. It was, in fact, our very first paid job was our local comic book shop owner asked us to do a Conan the Barbarian, a Frazetta painting. And, for $200. And so we made that, and that was our very first sale. And we were super nervous, and but it came out pretty well for our first gig.
Yeah, sounds awesome. And do you guys sometimes pinch yourselves when you wake up and go, do I really get to do this?
Absolutely.
All the time.
Absolutely. We're doing the same kind of stuff we were doing when we were 13 and 14 years old. Wow. With comic books, we were trying to draw, we were making things, and now we're getting paid for it. It's like, it is really a dream job. It really is. And we recognize this, and we know how lucky we are. We really are. Yeah.
I mean, it won't feel like work ever, because it's just what you guys have done forever.
That's right. Yeah.
And so Brandon, you said that you didn't come into it till later on. Jared, when did you start?
We used to make a lot of little stuff for arts and craft shows, and then we would go to the comic book conventions, and at some point it just kind of merged where I think there was a guy at the comic book conventions, John Fishner, who had some big dinosaur sculptures. So we were inspired by him to try to find out what clay he was using. And that's kind of how it started, just emulating some Texas sculptors. A guy named Claiborne Moore used to have a booth at those shows, the Dallas Fantasy Fairs. And so we were just trying to be like them, the guys who we saw doing it. And so then I said, Brandon, you got to come, you got to try this. And so I remember he made a Doctor Strange, and when I saw it, I was like, "Oh man, this is cool."
So you encouraged each other at the start as well.
Yeah, we really did. We were always into comics, so there was a lot of Wolverines and Spock and Nexus, and I remember even a Deep Space Nine diorama with the bridge and 3 or 4 characters. We had these delusions of grandeur early on that we would make a bunch of characters at once and never finish it, but it was fun to start things. And think we would have the time to finish it.
And then, we would, as like Jared said, we would do these conventions in Dallas or local to us, like Texas conventions. And when we really got discovered is when we took our work out to the San Diego Comic-Con. That's the big
one. Yeah.
And so that's, some people call that the deal-making convention. if you're an artist and you're doing work, we took our stuff out there. And as soon as we took it out there, we put it in the art show. It was all one of a kind. It's like 14 one of a kind pieces, comic book characters. And we got discovered almost instantly. We were very lucky with who saw our stuff and when they saw it. And started working on some video games and other resin kit projects. And we started working immediately. And like I said, we were very lucky. And
tell the Richard Taylor story.
Oh, yeah. Well, we met Richard Taylor.
We were set up in Artist Alley at Comic-Con.
Yeah.
And who brought him over?
Barsom.
There's an American resin kit sculptor named Barsom, and Barsom brought Richard Taylor over to our booth.
Wow.
In fact, it was like, I think 7:05 and the show had just closed. So it was like 5 minutes after the show had closed, but we were still hanging around.
Yeah.
And we were like, oh my gosh, Richard Taylor. Right? And he just loved our stuff. He's a big fan of all kinds of sculpting.
Yeah.
And,
and like I said, I had watched all the background stuff on those DVDs. So when he walked up, there was a moment of, wait a second, is this? This? And we were kind of pointing to him, and he was like, "Yeah, it is." And he's just super encouraging. And he's been super encouraging and super helpful with our careers. He's given us a quote. He's talked about us in interviews, and he has some of our pieces. He has some of our bronze work. As does Peter Jackson, and they've just been super helpful to us. It's been kind of awesome.
It's always nice getting a foot up from someone who has also once not been there. Do you know what I mean? Like I think that's, to me, that's why I love your guys' forum, because it's like you're giving people a space to actually share their work and get tips. And I heard you once say in an interview that I listened to about how no one ever really helped you guys, or there wasn't like an internet kind of place where you could go and get help. Right. You just had to, it was all trial and error, right? And mistakes. And
that's exactly right.
Yeah. Yes. So I like that.
And back in the beginning, people were even secretive about how they did things. They didn't want you to come in and take their jobs if you knew the secrets. And of course, Jared and I decided, well, we're just going to tell everybody everything, because if there are some kids who can do it as well as us or better than us, we want to see that. That excites us, It honestly does. And so, thank you for, the forum is on, it used to be on a separate site. Now it's on Facebook. About 12,000 people in there.
Yeah, it's mental.
And it's a cool mix of both amateur and professional. There are some really badass pros in there who are showing you things and showing you parts of their process and tips and tricks. And then there are just absolute beginners. And so the mix is very cool. It's very casual. It's very supportive, and encouraging, I think. And it's fascinating because you see sculptors and sculptures from all over the world. And we're thrilled with it. Yeah.
Yeah. My friend is really good friends with Paul Komodo, and I think he's in there as well. Yeah.
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
Yes, and he's a genius. He's a good friend of ours as well.
Good.
He's absolutely amazing.
No, so how do you build a forum like that? Like what we've done with Tiya is we've got because we have different business models in different countries, we decided to create 3 separate kind of groups for the US and then Australia, New Zealand, and then the UK. How do you grow a forum to be so, because you take no bullshit. I love it. I love that there's just none of that allowed.
Right.
How do you be so disciplined with it? Like, how do you control it, or is it pretty self-moderating now?
It's pretty self-moderating. I mean, basically everybody in there wants kind of the same thing.
Yes.
Every once in a while you get someone, just a troll or someone who's trying to cause trouble, and Jared and I just don't put up with that at all. You know, that but person also, was gone, but
this is like our 4th or 5th forum. So in the early days, we would argue with people and we would say stupid things, and we still will say stupid things, but there's kind of we've tried to mature and not get into the banter, which we all do. You know, we try to keep it focused on sculpting and process and just talking shop. Yeah. And I like the idea that somewhere in the back of my mind that students could come in there, that like a high school teacher could say, hey, this is a reasonable place where you can go and there's not going to be too much craziness. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And when someone has never sculpted before and they come into your forum and they ask for advice, what advice do you give someone? Because like for myself, I've just started sculpting, and the only thing I've ever sculpted with is Tiya Premium. I've never used anything else. So I don't know, I don't know much about the other materials that are out there. And I would love to kind of try lots of different things just to see. I mean, Kim tells me the difference between them all because she's used practically everything under the sun. But, I haven't. And so what advice would you give to someone that had never sculpted before, that were just like, hey, I feel like I want to do this. Where do I begin?
Yeah. So the stuff we've used for most of our career is super sculpting.
Yeah. And
that's what I would advise a beginner to use. So we've used Super Sculpey Firm. Now we're sometimes using Super Sculpey Medium Blend. But this has the advantage of you can build an armature and you can put the Super Sculpey right onto it. With some of these waxes or chiffon, you're heating it up, you're using a torch sometimes, and there's like a process.
Yeah.
I just like taking the clay right out of the box and putting it onto the armature. You know what I mean? It's ready to go. And then the advantage of Super Sculpey is you bake it in your home oven when you're completely through, at a low temperature. And then you can continue working on it afterwards. You can carve into it, you can add to it, you can sand it. And I think it's easy stuff to teach a beginner how to use. And we love the properties of it.
Yeah.
Recently, we've started using Aves Epoxy Sculpt, which is a 2-part compound. And that starts, when you mix it together, it starts hardening over a 2 or 3 hour period.
Yeah.
And so you have the issue with that stuff, any kind of epoxy like that, is that as you're kind of working over the hour, it's changing consistency. It's going from very wet and malleable, it's getting more firm. And so the texture is changing, and that's a little tricky if you're just starting.
Yeah.
And so, I would advise Super Sculpey, and a lot of our fundamental advice about sculpting in general is to sculpt what you love.
Yeah.
Jared and I started sculpting this comic book and this fantasy stuff. That's what we love, and we feel like sometimes there are guys in this industry who are, maybe they're just doing it for a check, or any other industry with sculpture. And you can kind of see that in the work, I think, sometimes. And it's like, if you love horses, sculpt horses. If you love sports figures, sculpt sports figures. But this is what we love, and we hope that passion comes through in the finished product.
Oh, absolutely. It's it's like I write poetry and I write fiction, and I write what I would like to read. I want to read that stuff, so that's why I write, and that's what's going to come across, is you're going to be passionate about it. So that'll definitely display itself in what comes out the other end.
But we have used Tiya some.
Oh, have you?
Talk about that a little.
Yeah, we did a little test with it.
Did you? Oh, cool.
Just a little dragon head. And I don't think we kept it wet for long enough.
Okay.
So that's the thing. We need to watch all the videos again. And
we love the idea of this stuff, that you could make something like something for outdoors, and there would be no molding or casting process. It would just go, you would put the sculpture straight out there.
Yeah.
Jared,
totally.
You would cut out the foundry that we have, using a foundry or whatever.
Yeah. Completely, yeah, and that's the thing. It was quite interesting going on the road, because we did a tour here in the UK, and it was really interesting because obviously our product spans the kind of from amateur right the way through to fine artist. But what we're finding is that for an amateur, saying wearing gloves and a dust mask when you're mixing, because essentially it has, Portland cement in it, so you need to wear a dust mask when you're first mixing it. And for amateurs, that's a big deal, because they're like, I have to wear gloves and a dust mask. But when you talk to a fine artist who's been wearing hazmat suits in a foundry or whatever, they're like, I only need to wear that. Like, that's nothing. So it was quite interesting, because people in the bronze part were going, so can I put it into a mold and then cast it and then do it in bronze? And we were like, well, you wouldn't need to. You would just cut out that whole bit. But they couldn't get it into their heads, because they were trying to work it into what they already knew, rather than realizing that it was a completely different process.
See, exactly. When we want to do something large and monumental, and we have done some of that, the foundry costs for bronze doing something of a 5 or 6 feet tall is huge.
Yes.
And the idea that we could sculpt something in Tiya, even on the spot, and just leave it there, essentially, that sounds awesome to us.
Yeah. I mean, we just had someone do a 41-inch wood elf king, 41 inches, and it was 2 foot wide, I think she said. And it was £66 of Tiya premium, so that probably retailed at what, like $250, something like that, and that's it, and plus whatever tinfoil she used for it, and you can use things like, at the moment they're doing this massive tree man in Weta that's going to be it's huge, and they just did it over foam and put foil over the foam, made their whatever they wanted it to look like, and then put the product on top to about an inch thick, so it looks like wood. It's amazing. But yeah, no, I'm excited to see what you guys do with it. If you ever are doing something really big, it would be really cool to watch the process. Yeah, cool.
We're excited about it. I think one thing we might do is just like a sea serpent that's in where the humps or the head is coming up, just kind of like a classic Nessie, where the head's coming up and then you have maybe 1 or 2 humps,
like separate pieces.
Yeah, so like the water.
Yes.
But we can't weld. We need to find somebody who can weld and make us a big armature.
Yeah, but you don't need to. You don't need to weld though. You don't need an armature. You just need tinfoil. Like
I've seen the videos where Kim's just using tinfoil inside it.
Yeah, it's so if you go on to the last podcast episode I put up was with a guy who works in the costume department at Weta, and his first piece with Tiya was this huge Thai naga, which is like a Thai dragon, and he made it in pieces like Nessie. Exactly, and it's pretty cool. And he said, I wish I'd started with the arse first, because he started with the face, and he was like, I didn't think that I should have got used to the product doing the boring body bit, and then had the wherewithal to actually do the face properly.
See, that's good to know. Yeah, that's the kind of little thing we want to. We just want to take in all the information we can. I think I saw one that was in a desert. That kind of inspired me. That was like that, where it has the humps going in sand.
Yes.
That might be the Burning Man or something.
Yeah, possibly.
Well, Warren has been great on our forum.
Yeah,
yes.
He's been super supportive of people's work. Not just ours, but Kim's, and he's really seems like a kind-hearted guy. And then we met Kim. In Los Angeles at Monsterpalooza, one of the big shows we do out there, and we just adored her. I mean, she was a sweetheart.
She is. She's gorgeous. They're both incredibly talented people when it comes to anything to do with sculpting. They're so good. And I get a lot of curveball questions because it is such a new product. There's lots of questions that we get a lot of the time because our FAQ page has just gone insane because people keep asking things and we're like, we don't know, go and try it. And they try it and they come back and they say, it worked amazingly well. And we go, okay, now you can put mosaics into it. Excellent. Because it has such a microscopic shrinkage that you can push things into it. Like people have done shells, gems, crystals, whatever, and it won't pop out when it freezes and thaws because it was freeze thaw tested 300 times. But yeah, I'd love to see you do that. Do you believe that everyone has a natural ability for creating, or do you believe that you have to be like, can you teach it? Can you learn it? Or do you think you have to be born with it?
I think you can teach it. I think it's in everybody somewhere to, different people, different degrees. There's always going to be the Paul Komoda, like you said, that is just, worth like 10 of us put together. Simon Lee and Tom Keebler. And you're always going to have kind of the superstars, but you can take somebody and show them the right wires, the right materials, the right tools, and give them all these things. And just like you're saying, you can help people, and that's all we can do. And we're happy to see people come along. I can remember seeing people's, first wobbly thing they make, and then a couple of years later, they're making, a great Spock or a great Worf or whatever it is they're doing, and you think, wow, they've come a long way.
Yeah, I think so too. I've had a few people that have said to me no because someone might have been told at school, oh, you aren't creative. Like my husband he was an artist for a long time. He's a recovering artist. He says, he got told at school, oh, you're not creative enough, and then he was like, oh, I'll show you, but a lot of people, if they get told that, it immediately puts them off and they just come to you and say, I will never be able to do that, What do you say to people like that? Do you encourage them and just say, try something small and then work your way up? Or what kinds of advice do you give them?
Well, I also think not everyone has to be super good. I think people can express themselves through sculpture in a lot of different ways, regardless of where they are sort of on the ladder of how good they are. One thing that's interesting, I was telling you I didn't start till my 20s. Is I drew a lot when I was a kid, but I didn't know I could do it. I didn't know I could sculpt until I sculpted. When Jared suggested I try it, I was like, I don't know. I don't think I can do that. And then when I had the clay in my hands, I realized I could do it. So that's kind of interesting. I think everybody has something inside them that they can get out through sculpture. I really do.
And just the creative process itself is kind of nurturing to the soul. I think it's good to just do stuff with your hands. It's very satisfying.
Yeah. Tell me 2 things you wish people would get in their heads about sculpting, that would understand about sculpting.
I always like to say, people compare it to painting a lot, but a painting is only from one direction, from one angle. And I feel like, a sculpture is 360 degrees. And I don't think that sculpting is harder than painting, but I think you have to put a lot more thought into poses and composition. Jared and I always talk about how these pieces spin, so how does it spin when you start turning it? And it's a different mindset when people come from 2D art into 3D art. You have to be thinking about that. A lot of times people are walking up to our booth at the convention or whatever, and they're coming from the side, Does it look cool from that direction? It's an added element for sure, is this idea that I want it to look good all the way around.
Yes.
And also, I think that there's no great mystery to it. You know, go on to YouTube. YouTube is such a great and valuable resource. Like when we were coming up 20 years ago, it just wasn't there. And so things like the forum and YouTube, if you go to YouTube and put in armature, or you put in polymer clay, or you put in Tiya, and there's multiple videos, and I always jokingly say you can become an expert on anything in 45 minutes. You know what I mean? Whether it's killing roaches or air conditioning, whatever it is. But
watching cats play with boxes. No, I'm like,
exactly. Watching old brush videos.
Yes.
Yeah, and you know, Michelangelo said like every block of stone has a sculpture inside it, waiting for the sculptor to discover it. And although that's not how we sculpt, we don't chip away.
Yeah,
I kind of, you know, I like that idea that the sculptures are just waiting to come out of you. You know, the clay is there and it's waiting to become something. And if you have it in your blood, then you wanna create these things. And
a lot of times if you'll just get your hands moving, something will. If you just go with that initial urge, you know, make it, you know, a foot tall or 2 feet tall or whatever you're going to do, whether it's going to be a dragon or a wizard or, you know, just start doing it. And the first one isn't going to be the best one, and the second one isn't going to be much better. But eventually, with repetition, you know, you start to make things that are cool.
Yeah.
And
that's right.
so we love it.
Yeah.
And what one technique in sculpting do you use more than any other? Or do you not?
It's additive.
Yeah, exactly. So some Hollywood sculptors who are friends of ours do something called pulling. And imagine putting on more clay than you need, and you're using loop tools, and you're pulling away the excess clay to reveal a face or what have you beneath. And that's kind of what these guys, Michelangelo and Leonardo and these guys were doing with these blocks of stone, where they're chiseling away the negative space to reveal a figure. Jared and I are the opposite of that. We're additive. So we start with a wire armature and we add little pieces, building it up over time. And we
like dripping a sandcastle.
That's right. It gets bigger and bigger. And our method is kind of called pushing. And sometimes we call that other method pulling, where you're pulling away the negative space. We're only adding to the figure itself.
Yeah.
So that's one very specific method that we use.
I heard you guys like monsters.
Of course.
Guilty.
A little birdie told me. What monster would you most identify with? Each of you.
Good question.
That is a good question. I like that. Pumpkinhead, maybe.
Pumpkinhead.
He was bent on revenge. But the monsters we love. I love the Rancor.
From Return of the Jedi.
I love the Rancor.
Okay.
Verminthrax.
That's
from
Dragon
Slayer.
Yeah, that's a Phil Tippett stop motion or go motion.
Yeah, both of those are Phil Tippett.
That's right. Yeah, they both are. Yeah, and of course we love the Xenomorph, the H.R. Giger, that really set the standard for movie monsters after it came out. It was incredibly ripped off in so many other movies and comic books.
And it makes you wonder why so much stuff is CG when
Yeah.
Alien was a practical effect. I mean, are you going to do better than Alien? Are you going to do better than E.T.?
Right.
But don't get me going on that.
Yeah. Could you talk about it for a while?
Yeah. we still love those practical effects, and maybe it's because of we have an affinity, and feel a connection with those sculptors from back in the day who were sculpting this stuff out of clay and then making a mold, and using foam rubber and latex and all of this. But there was something about these things being in the actual frame, especially in monster movies. You could feel that it was right there next to the victim, and so it felt scary to us.
Well, you won't believe this, but it wasn't until I heard you guys saying you liked the film The Thing that I actually watched it. I'd never seen it before.
Oh, nice!
And I watched it the other night, and I was like, oh, because I kept saying to my husband, "Is that the scariest bit over?" And he was like, "No." And he joked and he was like, "Yeah, that's the scariest bit." And we were actually eating dinner when the dog turns into the monster, and I was like, "Okay, we have to put that off now. It's looking too much like my spaghetti."
There is a spaghetti type scene in there.
Yeah. If you guys were in Antarctica with a bunch of your friends and that happened, what would you have done differently?
That's good. I think McCready handled it pretty well. The tests and and they kind of knew to sacrifice themselves. It was bigger than them,
Well, I would just assume Jared was the monster, and I would kill him immediately.
Yeah.
Just on principle. and then we would find out later.
I love my brother, but he's going.
We could finally get credit as just Brandon Shiflett and not the Shiflett brothers, and that would make my day.
It would just be the Shiflett brother.
Exactly. The Shiflett brother.
Just knock off that S. You're all good.
Yeah.
He can't wait.
He's going to have a piano fall on his head at some point.
And did you, have you made the monster from The Thing?
We have never done that.
We have.
Oh, wow.
We actually became friends with a couple of the people who worked on the movie and sculpted stuff, and it's a huge honor, and it's one of the incredible perks of our careers that we get to meet some of our heroes, and some people we really look up to, and we've kind of had a charmed life in that regard as far as meeting our artists who we admire. It's been incredible.
Yeah. Is it sometimes disappointing, or like did you?
Sometimes it is. But a lot of times it's really cool.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. Because you build these people up in your head, and that happened to me once. I met this author who I had just so looked up to for so long, and I was like, I don't want to read anything else that you've ever going to write again.
And then it like retroactively affects the work. You're like, was it that good?
Was it? Actually, yeah. What did you guys think of the latest Star Wars movie? Or
we liked it.
Did you?
I haven't seen it yet, but I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I liked it a lot.
No spoilers then.
Spoilers, but I loved it. Yeah.
Ah, okay. Interesting. I've heard such polarizing views about it. So
I've seen people saying widely varying reports.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is your biggest hope for the future of sculpting?
Well, I think at some point the hand wrought stuff will come back into vogue, as they say, and I don't think you can beat the CG, the ZBrush, but I think that things that are handmade are different and they have their own value.
I would agree. I would say that we love so much of the ZBrush stuff we've seen. We have friends who do it who are just freaking masters of it, of these digital sculpting programs. And so the kids are jumping straight into that and learning just that. And I would hope that these young kids in the next 5, 10, 20 years who are coming up while they're doing that, I would hope that they would keep their hands in the clay every once in a while.
Yes.
So that they still retain a real world experience with clay, with the gravity, with the weight of it, with how it feels in your hands. I think you can learn things to make you better at ZBrush by using real clay and physical sculpting.
There's a wave of sculptors that aren't sculpting.
Right, yeah. Of course, because with the digital, someone contacted us, was it ILM? I can't remember. Someone was said that they were working all day on a computer creating stuff, but they wanted to come home and actually do something like tactile and in front of them, and that they could kind of get their hands onto, and because they spend so much time on a computer. So that's my hope as well, is that people actually live in the real world rather than always be stuck to their phone or their tablet or their computer. That's my biggest hope as well, actually. What's your biggest fear so far about sculpting? Have you got to the point where you actually are so not fearful about trying anything, or would you be a bit going into it with a bit of trepidation?
There are things I have trepidation about. What I think we have trepidation about is big stuff. Mm-hmm. I think our sweet spot is like a foot tall or 10 inches. Mm-hmm. And so we were asked to do recently a big monumental piece of Chupacabra in bronze. And I think we weren't positive we could do that. We took the job, and we went for it. And it really turned out pretty decently. But yeah, I think if someone asked us to do something that was 10 feet tall or 8 feet tall, and I know, Kim and people with Tiya have done a lot of this stuff. We've seen some amazing stuff, giant stuff. I think that's what would scare us a little, for sure. And also, frankly, too small. There are people on our forum who are doing miniatures, and I'm just like, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah.
It's so small. I could never, even with magnification, I don't think I would want to take on that. Too small or too big. Yeah,
I would be all thumbs with something like that. Whereas with something like we did some training down in England, and the guys wanted to do this massive archway for their studio door, and they wanted to make it out of Tiya Premium and do and then they wanted to be able to take it off the wall and put it on the front of their booth when they go to, shows and stuff. So Kim helped them, put it together on the wood, and then, we all built it up over, and within about 4 hours of us, about 5 people, just balling up tinfoil and bulking it out, we'd managed to get the armature done on an 8.5 foot tree. And it was incredible. It was such a good learning experience for me, because Kim said, this is where I am most comfortable. She's like, the small stuff, it's fine, but I love doing big, giant things, and this allows her to do those big, giant things. So yes, but it's when you see someone doing something like that, she can build like a human-sized figure in under 3 hours with a roll of tinfoil. It's just like, how?
Actually.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like I've seen pictures of that tree, but I might just be imagining it. Do you think they posted that online?
We haven't yet, because what we wanted to do was do a time lapse of it, and they then were left on their own with it to kind of we put the first kind of layer on and scored it, because with our product you can come back to it sort of any time after, as long as you leave a key. So as long as you leave the surface really well keyed, you can come back to it weeks, months, even years later if you wanted to, and it'll just bond right back on again. So you don't need to finish something within a quick amount of time. You can be taking your time and luxuriating it over it, which is what I love. So.
Nice.
And by key, do you mean like scored, like roughed up?
Yeah, like basically take a fork and just drag the fork at a sort of 45-degree angle over the whole thing. And then, so once you've put that initial kind of layer on, you score it all. And then the next day you go back and you can start to do like sections at a time. And that's how they did the dragon in Seattle. They just did a section of it at a time. As long as they'd kept that surface keyed, they could just keep going back to it. Yeah.
So that's grip.
Yeah, to give it that grip. So it laminates right back on. You just put a tiny little bit of water onto it, then add the new batch of product on and do your detail. And yeah, So it means you can kind of take time to do something that large rather than, oh gosh, I have to all have it all done in this amount of time.
Panic sculpting. That's the worst sculpting.
Yeah. Yeah. Did your parents, were they encouraging of your creative life when you were younger?
They really were.
Were they?
They our mom promoted arts and crafts shows, so she would always give us a little booth, and we could try to sell whatever little things we had made, and they never sold, but it was still encouraging, and it gave us room to make different little things. I think some of the first things we made were just little rolls of clay that were we called them snakes, but they were just rolls of clay. We try to sell those, and
they were super supportive.
That's good.
They bought us tons of art supplies when we were young. When our dad worked in like a construction industry, and he would get up every morning at 4 a.m. and and he never said that's not, art isn't a real job or anything like that. They were always super supportive, and they thought we had talent. No, basically everybody's parents think their kid have talent, but they supported us and helped us along the way. Still do, really.
So they must be really proud of how far you guys have come with your art and your creativity.
Yes, ma'am. I think they really are. Yeah, they are.
It's great. Yeah, our mom shares everything, so that's good. Yeah, it's sweet.
She's like your biggest fan.
She is. Yeah.
I love it. And what kinds of things, on a daily basis, if I read a part of a poem or a part of prose, it gives me this feeling inside that just makes me want to get out my pen and paper and start writing. What makes you want to get out your tools and start sculpting?
So for me, looking at art, there are these books, Spectrum, the year's best fantastic, art, and they're collected the year's best art, fantasy art. And when I flip through these books, there are 23 of them now. I can flip through these books, and a lot of them are paintings, some of it's illustration, and a lot of that stuff that will get me going. It's a drawing in a comic book, something that I really admire. When I see some really good art, it makes me want to start.
Yeah.
The news feed on Facebook, just we're friends with so many sculptors.
Right.
Just waking up in the morning and having some coffee and looking at all the cool stuff. That's pretty inspiring, And it's kind of amazing, just to think about the technology, because Jared and I started in the early 90s when none of this existed,
Yeah.
Now we're waking up, you see sculptures from a guy in Asia, a guy in Australia, a guy in Europe, right all there, we're scrolling by, and we're all in sort of this community. And I've had, it's kind of cool and amazing. I've had people tell me who straddle different mediums. Some people who are 2D illustrators and sculptors, that sculpting is sort of one of the most encouraging and supportive communities out there. And it's a good community to be a part of.
Yeah, I like it. I think it's I never ever thought that I would be nearly age 40 and be getting into sculpting. But I really am. And I think it's because I'm kind of, I started out with Tiya just helping with some social media stuff. And then they were like, hey, can you hold this? Hey, can you hold this? Hey. And it just kind of raged out of control. And I was like, hey, wait a minute. I've not written for ages, but I'm actually really getting into the whole sculpting world and just seeing what everyone's, how a drawing translates into a sculpture and how a thought translates into a sculpture. And now I find myself going around my own town, and I've been away for so long. And just going around and seeing it with Kim's eyes, because Kim was here recently and she was like, look at the sculpture on the side of that building. It's just there, begging to be looked, you know. And I'd never hardly noticed it before because it was just part of where I grew up. But for her, it was like, oh my gosh, this place is teeming with inspiration, you know. And she was like, I want to go home and make miniature villages of all the things I've seen, you know. So yeah, it's very interesting now that I'm getting into sculpture, because I'm starting to notice a lot more things that I didn't notice before about my own city. So yeah,
that's wonderful. Yeah, that's awesome.
It's really cool. I've started making like little castles and things, you know, just tinkering with it now that I've got some here in my home, and I'm just like, oh, what could I make tonight? You know, and just trying to push the boundaries of it myself as well, which is awesome. I imagine you're both sculpting an awful lot of the time, but when you aren't, what would we find you doing?
So I'm still in my late 40s, a big comic book reader. Mm-hmm. And I still follow a lot of comics, and I spend a lot of time doing that. And we love science fiction movies and horror movies.
Yeah.
And dogs.
Yeah, I was just about to say, I was hanging out with the dogs and watching the news and cursing at the news and
Yeah. Well, your news has had a lot to curse over.
Yeah, that's right. It really has.
Yeah. Same here. It's kind of like, what is happening in the world? I tell you. What kind of dogs do you have?
Just some mutts, just some
rescue dogs.
I guess rescue dogs in today's vernacular.
Yeah.
Just some ditch dogs that we've taken in.
And do you guys live close by? Like, do you live close by to each other, or?
Yes, we do.
Oh, that's cool.
When we started sculpting together 25 years ago, we had literally like a partner's desk. Mm-hmm. We were facing each other.
Oh, nice.
The same room and everything. And we don't do that anymore, but we're close enough, and with photos and videos, and we talk to each other 3 or 4 or 5 times a day. And so we're constantly back and forth, handing pieces off, art directing each other, that kind of thing.
And are there any other Shiflett siblings?
So there are 6 of us.
Really?
Yes. But we're the only 2 artists.
Really?
That's right.
Interesting. What kinds of other things do your family do?
So there's a real estate agent. There's a high school administration vice principal.
Wow.
So that kind of thing.
Completely different, yeah.
Our little brother's kind of a writer.
Yes.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Nice. And do they love looking at your stuff as well?
No, they don't care at all. They're totally over it.
They're like, I don't want to see anything else, guys. Just keep it to yourself.
The people we impress with our stuff are like our nieces and nephews. We're the cool uncles, because we do the comic book stuff.
Yeah, that is true.
Mm-hmm.
Not so much our own siblings, though.
Anything else you want to tell me about your creative journey that you would want other people to know?
That is a good question. Do what you love, because it worked for us, In the simplest terms, I always say, if you like Spock, sculpt Spock. If you like race cars, sculpt race cars. And do that. We liked Wolverine and Lobo, and so just be true to yourself, and that's the
Don't do it for the money, kids.
Yeah, don't do it for the money, because it's a hard road.
Yeah, it is. We started out, when we first got well known, it was for Marvel Comics statues that we were doing, and we did a lot of cool comic book stuff. Mm-hmm. But about halfway through our career, we started doing more and more of our own characters. And we love comic book stuff. And when we get the right offer, we'll still do that. But at the same time, it's so fulfilling to do your own stuff, our own characters. And I think that's really almost given us a second career with our own stuff. And we're producing it in resin and cold cast porcelain and bronze. And we're having a blast. And I would encourage anybody who's interested in getting into it or who's already into it to check out our forum on Facebook, because there are a lot of really good sculptors in there.
Yeah, Shiflett Brothers Sculpting Forum.
Great.
That's right.
And I would imagine that everyone, like I'm just thinking everyone knows who you guys are, but for people who have never heard of you before, which I'm guessing they all have, but possibly some of our customers in Australia might not have heard of you, I don't know. Where would they go to find out? So you've got your website, which is shiflettbrothers.com, is that right?
It's shiflettbrothers.com, and that's SHIFLETT, one F and two T's.
Okay, cool. And Facebook.
And then on Twitter and Instagram, both, we're at Shiflett Bros, BROS. On Twitter and Instagram. And our Instagram is pretty cool because obviously the stuff we do is pretty visual. So I think that Instagram works really well for our stuff.
Have you found that on Instagram it needs to be photos that are like, instead of works in progress, it needs to be finished pieces? Or do you do both?
No, we do both. In fact, people love the in progress stuff.
Oh, interesting.
They really do. The people who are into it, they almost like that more than the finished stuff, I think. You know, if you get a hand in there, or if they see a tool or a hand in the picture, and where they can kind of see what you're doing, people really respond to that. We're going to do something awesome in Tiya, and we can't wait to show you.
Well, we're going to do something.
We're going to do something. We're going to try to do something awesome. But
no, you know what? You're going to do something awesome.
And we can't wait to show you and Warren and Kim once we do.
One last question. I've kind of asked you a little bit about this, but if you could invite any 5 people, dead or alive, to dinner to your house, who would they be? What would you ask them that you don't already know?
Oh, that is good. That is good. How about,
I'll go with some of the people we've already named.
Yep.
Michelangelo, Rodin, Frank Frazetta, the fantasy artist. We love Mobius, the French comic book icon.
Yes.
Who's gone now as well, but these people are all dead so far.
Yep. Lots of dead people at dinner. And what would you ask them that you don't already know?
Lots of dead people at dinner. I might ask them what their vices were. What are your regrets? Where did you just screw up? You know?
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Yeah, that would be interesting, actually. Yeah, because you might find that, like, you know, that unfinished kind of sculptures that you were talking about, maybe they just got called to dinner, or
exactly,
or they needed to go on holiday, or they were just like, you know what, we'll come back to it.
Well, this is what me and Jared tell people. People are like, you guys, it's so artistic and it's so genius the way you leave things. And me and Jared are like, no, we're just lazy. You know, we just quit on this piece, and that's why it looks so rough.
This was meant to look like this, but we got lazy. Yeah. I love it. So I'm going to share with you, I'm going to send you after this the picture of the Thai nugget, just so you can see what I'm talking about, because that was just made with little bits of tinfoil, well, not little bits of tinfoil, but tinfoil. And the brand that we say to use is Kirkland's heavy duty tinfoil.
Okay.
The difference sculpting in that tinfoil to normal tinfoil is like night and day. It's incredible. You can get, because it's so thick and you don't need as much of it to start creating. And what Kim always says is that you're sculpting in the tinfoil and you're putting Tiya Premium on and doing the decorative layer on top.
Right.
So that's the hard part that people try and get around their heads, is like, I'm not really sculpting in the product. I'm doing detail in the product and sculpting into it and adding stuff on. But the main armature is you're sculpting in the tinfoil and you're getting it as close to what you want it to look like as possible. So.
And she said, as soon as you pick up the aluminum foil, you're sculpting.
Yes.
That's a great line. I love that.
Yeah, because I mean you are, and it's I think for people who have been sculpting for years, that's a mind shift that needs to happen. That sometimes just people just are like, I can't get through past that. Like, I don't understand until they've seen it and had it in their hands. And that's why we're thinking classes are a really good way to go, because people can start to use it, and then their minds, you see their minds just going like, oh, I could do this and this and this, and suddenly they're up to like, you know, a 10-foot sculpture, and you're like, whoa, okay, right. this is really cool.
That's what we thought. We had to order some of it. We got 100 pounds of it, and
wow.
we poured them with it.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, can't wait to see what you guys create. And thank you so much for being such awesome guests today. And
thanks for asking. We're happy to do it.
Yeah. No. If there's anything you need from us in the future, if you want any help with any project that you're doing or anything like that, then Warren and Kim and I and Richard would be so happy to help out. So just flick us anything and go, what's happening here? And why is it doing this?
Help us, please. Help us.
Help, we're drowning. No, thank you so much. And enjoy the rest. I heard it was your birthday, Brandon, just the other day. Is that right? So happy birthday. Yeah. Yes. Happy birthday. What did you do?
I did a lot of traveling, and my parents cooked me a great dinner.
Oh, nice. Can I ask you something really quickly?
Yes, go ahead.
Your day, like from start to finish, what time does it start and what time does it finish? Like with your creativity? Or is it like constant?
No, what's crazy is Jared and I do our best work in the middle of the night. So we stay up all night, we work all night, and we basically sleep all day.
I like it. Okay, yes. So you're nocturnal sculptors.
We are, indeed.
That's how it works most of the time.
And I've read about some people through history who did that. Mozart, maybe, I think. I've read that JFK, the president, stayed up, all hours. Anyway, that's what works for us.
There's something nice about being up when you know that everyone else is sleeping.
It's peaceful.
It is.
There is. There's a sense of like, it's like, it feels more inspiring somehow.
Right. And no interruptions, no phone calls,
No emails. Yeah, nothing.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much for letting me know that. Sorry I interrupted you.
No problem.
Okay, well, you take care, and I will see you around the forum. When I start creating stuff, I'll probably be asking lots of questions.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. Take care.
Take care, you guys. Speak soon. Bye. Bye.
Thanks so much for taking the time to listen to our podcast today. Hey, I have a favour to ask, and it won't take very long. Would you be so kind as to go and leave a review on iTunes? This helps more people find out about our podcast, and as we grow and evolve, we love more listeners like you. Thanks so much. Until the next time.
If you want to know more about Tiya and our amazing product, Tiya Premium, then visit www.paltiya.com and join our international fan base.